Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Goldfish Report. I'm your host, Louisa. Today is Friday, June 1st, 2018, and this is our weekly Country Roads Report with Winston Shrout. Welcome, Winston. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Every morning I wake up, I figure, okay, another day. So we just move forward as best we can.
Yeah, but I told you the dollar joke this morning, so that really kind of get you
Yeah, please
going.
don't tell that on the air. I
I
mean,
wouldn't.
people might, kind of give you a strange look for that one.
Well, I didn't make it up, but it was funny.
Yeah.
We're going to talk today about an article that Winston wrote, and we just published. Winston published this also on his mailing list, but we also published it on the Goldfish Report blog and on our website. And of course, it's been posted on Facebook as well. It's called The Sin Against Money. And also, Winston's going to be talking in detail about Nesara and what that means, what it is, and what it means to all of you. So we shall get started, Winston. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. Like I say, I was visiting, with one of my friends. I mean, well, we were talking on the phone and so forth. And he had brought something up, that after it sunk in a little bit, it made a little bit of sense. And this resulted in a conversation that he had had with another friend from Ireland. And they were talking about money, almost in the thought process that money as a thing would, might even in fact be a sentient entity. And I got to thinking about that. And so if that's the case, then I wrote this article, maybe to kind of explain a little bit of that, because again, we talk about we got trees, we got rocks, we got this, we got that, and they're inanimate in a certain respect, but we have people who report communicating with trees. We have, dog whisperers, we have horse whisperers, we have all kinds of different people that are reporting that they can communicate with some of these things in nature that, just a little bit unusual. So, that thought process mine that in this article to perhaps describe money as a entity in and of itself. And so then the question I'm asking in this article basically, is it possible to sin against money? In other words, can you misuse it? So anyway, in this article, I took it down to the first grade level as far as description. And so I used a little bit of humor in it. For instance, I call them silo tenders.
Okay.
We can look at this just briefly. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time with it. Anyway, so I titled this article "The Sin Against Money." So it's kind of, in some respects, it's kind of, tongue in cheek. But I tried to break it down into levels of, just basic understanding. And so, like I say, we generally think of, money as being an inanimate object. It might be coins, it might be bills, it might be electronic entries on the computers or whatever. But it has a great deal of influence on us, and we have a great deal of influence on it. So if that's the case, I'm just kind of, like I say, tongue in cheek, postulating, is it possible to commit a sin against something? For instance, could you sin against a tree? Well, yeah, if you went and broke branches off of it or carved your initials in it, stuff like that, could you injure an inanimate object? Yeah, you could. And so that's my point here. And so this article kind of goes into a little bit of a history. Way back in the earliest of times, did people need to use money? The answer is no, they didn't. Especially the very first instances. For instance, you take pioneers that were going out to, take on the responsibilities of the great frontier or whatever. They were, basically concerned with the necessities, food, shelter, clothing, and all those kind of things. And, and money was not a factor in any of that. But when we start to develop something known as surplus, in other words, let's say a pioneer went out, and they started, cutting down trees, making log cabins, cleared fields, started to have crops, started to have animals, sheep, and all these kind of things. Once they got to the point when their necessities were met, would they develop a surplus? Now, a good farmer, a good steward would naturally do that. And so the question gets to be then, what effect and what can be done with surplus? And so what I point out is that the surplus is in fact the origin of capitalism. Basically, capitalism can be defined as more goods or products than can be used up. And so, we'd usually think about capitalism. For instance, we went over that one article about Ayn Rand a while back.
Right.
And, she was talking about capitalism, making money, and all these kind of things. But again, capitalism can only exist if there's a surplus of product that has been produced, which creates capital. In other words, people don't sell stuff because they need it. They sell stuff they don't need. And so if they're selling stuff, it's obvious they don't need it. I mean, you look at it from that, logic point. So anyway, they, would create some kind of a market, or something like that. So at a certain point, once it got away from the local, area where people lived at, then they might want to trade for something at a distance that was further away than they were willing to travel. And so how can you do commerce over a long distance? So I'm just using the example of a Kansas farmer. The wife wants calico dress and bonnets and all these kind of things. So they would have to send to St. Louis for that, you see. And so how do you get the calico dress from St. Louis out into the middle of the farmland? Well, you would use money to do that with. And so the money would be used as a transfer of energy over a longer distance than someone was willing to travel, you see. So again, distance has a lot to do with it. So then the question gets to be, what should we use for money? And we have, over the period of our histories and so forth, we've had all types of different kinds of money. But traditionally, among the European people, they have valued gold and silver as money. And the only reason, for that is because gold and silver don't rust. In other words, they're what's called noble metals. And so they retain themselves, unlike other types of metals, such as iron or tin or whatever. And so gold and silver became the favorite metal for use as money, just for that one factor alone. Otherwise, gold and silver is basically useless. I mean, I give the example here, could you make a plow out of gold? Well, you could, but it wouldn't work. Could you make nails out of silver? You could, but they wouldn't drive very well and they just bend over. So in some respects, gold and silver are perfectly worthless. In other senses, they're useful because, again, of the nature of their, they don't oxidize, put it that way.
Characteristics, yeah, the
Yeah,
intrinsic
so
characteristics.
they're good for that. Anyway, then I get into a little bit of logic here. And so the farmer starts to accumulate surplus in gold and silver. What to do about that? You can't eat the stuff. And since there were no werewolves in Kansas, they couldn't even make silver bullets. Just a little bit of humor there. Okay. So I like to be facetious sometimes, just so that people think about things.
Yeah,
Anyway,
catch 'em.
so then the farmer, being a farmer, what does he do to store up all these gold and silver coins? He builds a silo. I mean, a farmer knows what a silo is. That's where they put their excess grain or different things, that they've produced. And so the farmer creates a coin silo. Anyway, and then I just kind of, like I say, this is kind of facetious. It's easy to read, it's kind of fun. But anyway, I talk about, where gold and silver actually come from. A lot of people don't realize this, but, gold is actually one of the more abundant metals on the planet. It can be found in the ground, as one refiner pointed out to me. He said most of the gold is actually in the ocean. He said it's there in microscopic. But he says the oceans are just full of gold. If you wanted to go gold mining, just figure out how to get the gold out of seawater. He said there are plenty of it.
Wow.
Yeah, so over the years. I've talked to various refiners, like this one fellow I knew. Once the platinates arrived on the scene, then gold and silver started to take a background because his ultimate refinement was for platinum,
Platinum, yeah.
and he actually showed me a heap of metal sitting over by the fence. I said, "What's that?" He said, "Silver." I said, "You're not refining?" No. He said, "It's trash metal because of the relative value." And so what he was doing, he was actually refining gold to pay for the refining of platinum, which had the very highest value. So you see these kind of, commercial things when you're talking about it. Anyway, again, like I say, we don't need to spend a lot of time with this article. You put it up on your website so people can look at it. I put it up on mine. But it's just a basic, to gender a little bit of thought about money itself, and then to ask the question, can money be misused, or can we sin against money? It's just something to think about, because here shortly we expect to see a whole lot of money going all over the place. And will it be used properly? Will people have the proper respect, or will it cause them harm? That's the question I'm trying to get at here. Because
you're saying there's like a karma attached to it in a sense, right?
Well, yeah, there is karma, but there's also another element. If you go into quantum, you realize that intent creates substance.
Right.
You can actually create substance with your intent. So with this money, what are your intentions? If your intentions are good, then you will be creating good things.
Indeed.
If your intention is bad, you'll be creating bad things. And so people need to take that into consideration, because you look at our history with the use of money, the intention, the quantum in regards to money, the intentions obviously have been bad, because look what's happened on the planet with money. It's created bad things. That has to do with intent. So we have to be very, very careful when we start to use anything as to what our intentions are, because it will create a substantial situation. Let me put it that way. Anyway, like I say, this is kind of just like a little fun article. I reduce it down into basically first grade language and logic and stuff.
Mhm.
It just kind of, like I say, a little fun article. So again, the question is, after can you sin against money? I would have to say yes. And so the question is, can you correct yourself? Can you repent of your sins against money? And that's our challenge. Anyway, just kind of a little fun article there that the people might want to look at perhaps and have a little bit of a chuckle.
Well, can people do that? Can people repent? Can they redeem
Sure.
themselves?
Uh-huh. But what you start to do is consider what's happened and the complexities
Mm.
in relationship to money and what has been created on the planet because of the intent. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, we're like I say, because mankind, unlike the other creations on this planet, because we have free will, our intentions can create either a wonderful and glorious place to live, or we can create a sewer. And for the most part, and certainly in these last number of years, our intentions have created a sewer. And so we would like to change that. And so can we repent, of our evil intents, our sin against money, as as we're talking about here? And the answer, yes, we can. Yes, we can. And so, but it would be important for people to have an understanding, because money has become so complex. Now, we've spent a lot of time over these last, number of interviews and so forth, trying to analyze money, where it came from, some of these basic analysis and so forth. And then, like I say, this article is kind of getting back to a first grade approach, if I can use that word. Money, from a first grader point of view. And so that's what I try to do with that article, because I would think that because of the complexities that we've created, the people simply don't understand. And so we're getting into a situation presently, and when we start talking about Nesara here in a minute, again, we're dealing with a very complex problem. And so we need to reduce it down into more simplistic understanding, so that people don't become confused, because at some point, the ultimate goal is to get into a situation where we don't use money at all. Now, you recall, one of the last few interviews we had done, I was suggesting little experiments that people could do. And that is learn how to trade, And so, I hope people, took that message and tried it out. And that is, trading with your neighbors, with your family, with your friends, and this so that you can see the basics of it, about negotiating and so forth. And so the ultimate goal of the financial correction on the planet the ultimate goal is to get into no money, because we can't enter the galactic community still using money. It won't work. All right. With all that said, let's look at some a few articles here, and I'll send them to you so that people can have the whole article to look at. Anyway, there's been much said in times past about Nesara. Some people say, well, no, that's a bunch of baloney. Other people say, no, that's a very real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you right now, it's a very real thing. Very real thing. And the efforts that are being made with the interim government. Now, we spoke about this. I mean, I gave as much knowledge as I had on that subject. Anyway, is that real? Oh, yes, it's real. But one of the efforts of this interim government will be to announce and start to execute Nesara. So we're going to go into a little bit of the history of that today. A couple of real good articles I've collected over the years that might be helpful to people to understand what that is. Uh, I mean, I first learned about it way back in the early 2000s. You know, certainly the guys I was running around with, you know, it came up. And so we started to investigate it. And there was uh, a lot of foolishness about it. But on the other hand, you know, I became convinced that it was correct what was said, and so we started to look at, you know, at what point would this be implemented, what would be the effects of it, and so forth. And so it's taken a very, very long time. I mean, it's been almost 18 years, and so we're still waiting. But because I personally believe that the announcement of Nesara is imminent, that it would be important for people to have, you know, a fair understanding of it, certainly so that it would not be a surprise when it happened. So if you have you know, at least the basic running knowledge of it, then when it's implemented, you can move right into it. Now, again, Nesara is an interim step as we move toward ascension into a no money situation. So this is what we're working toward. I mean, I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to see all that. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. I don't know. But certainly many of the people listening to this, and especially the young people, you will see this. The question is, what will you do with it? It is a tool. It is something that could be used to elevate the vibrational frequency of mankind so that the planet and the people on the planet can move toward higher and higher dimensions. Okay, so it's a bit esoteric, you know, in our thought process and so forth, but I think it's necessary. I think it's necessary. So let's look at a couple of these articles I've accumulated.
It's funny though that you're saying that, you know, in some way money can be esoteric. So it's already, you know, and, you know, because it does have that, the consequence of perhaps our intention of raising vibrations, raising dimensional
Yeah.
frequencies.
Now this first article came out some years ago on Rumor Mill News.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always been an interesting project, Rumor Mill News. You know, I've corresponded with them from time to time on various, you know, issues and items and so forth. But this one here, they're posting an article in regards to a reader who asked the question, would someone please define the world global settlements? Now, this again was all the way back in 2011. And so, you know, some have been inquiring about Nesara and the various things. So anyway, this particular article apparently appeared in a website in regards to Galactic Roundtable welcomes Nesara. Now, let me stop this share for a moment, and I'll bring it back up because I know you hate for me to talk with stuff on the air. Back in the mid '80s, I had an experience. That's when I was living out in the desert. It was the afternoon. It was day. Felt comfortable. The kids were out. I don't know, throwing rocks at jackrabbits or something. So the wife and I were just sitting there in the front room relaxing. And then all of a sudden, I said, my father's here, which would be pretty rare. After he passed away, I hadn't
Mhm.
had much,
Mm.
to do with him. So when he showed up, I thought, well, this is pretty rare. I wonder what he's here for. And
Mm.
so anyway, so I asked him why. I said, my father's here. I said, can you see him or sense him? She said, no, she couldn't,
Mm.
which is kind of unusual for her because she's much more sensitive than I am.
Mm.
And so I asked her, I said, well, he's here. I don't know what he's here for. Anyway, at that point, now this is the middle of the day, the sun was shining,
Mm.
this is not a dream. And so anyway, a vision opened up to me. And it looked like I was looking through a screen or a cheesecloth. Anyway, it was kind of a veil, so I couldn't see clearly what was going on. But I had the sense that there were several groups sitting around tables, as it were, conversing on various subjects, and I was thinking, okay, what is this all about? And then later on, along about, I don't know, about 2010, the answer came to me when someone I was corresponding with on Skype
Mm.
just brought up to me, said, hey, I saw you the other day. I said, you were really where? She said, well, we were at a galactic round table chaired by Saint Germain. And we were discussing, what this, that, or the other. So that kind of put me in mind of that vision I'd had back, some years previous to that. And so I asked her, I said, really? So I was testing it,
Mm.
to see if I could get some kind of verification.
Sure.
And I said, okay, so you saw me. I said, how did I appear when I came to that round table? She said, you came as a rushing wind. And at that point, because I knew,
Yeah.
I knew a whole lot about myself.
Mhm.
When she said that, I said, okay, yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah, that was me. So anyway, these round tables, which are simply planning uh, groups, and there's many of them. And so this one particular article here, whereas they're talking about, uh, let's see, no, I can't remember where I was at on that one. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Yeah, this one particular article here, which came from a galactic roundtable. This is probably one such group. Is it the one that I'm associated with? I
Mm.
don't know. I don't think so. But there are many of them.
Mm.
And so plans are made, for certain projects and so forth, that materialize in our physical world. Now, this particular information here has to do with the prosperity programs that are explained. Nesara is explained. 9/11 is explained,
Mm.
and so they go into quite a bit about the history, and then in particular they bring up this account Saint Germain, who at this point, we know as being an ascended master,
Mhm.
and has been working for a very long time. This has been a long time in the planning. And so from time to time, he comes into the physical world to institute, certain things. And so at one point, now we had talked about Francis Bacon and, and all those things, then finally coming back from the Himalayas and reappearing in Europe as the Count Saint Germain. So anyway, they go into a little bit of his history, what he was doing uh, with some of his things. And then he talks about around 1727, he shared his secret money-making techniques to certain German bankers in the hopes that they would use the money to help humanity. Using his techniques, they, along with the monarchies, chose to squander the money for themselves. Even to this day, these bankers have continued to keep this knowledge secret. So what Germain had introduced was used improperly.
Mhm.
That's the point this author is trying to make. So eventually Saint Germain realized the money was never going to be used for benevolent purposes. So he pulled his money out in 1729. He put it into his own world trust. At the founding of the trust, it was stipulated that this money would be released in the year 2000. Now, there's certain stipulations that go along with this, as we point out here, because eventually I'm just going to make the statement that the money that would implement the announcement and execution of Nesara comes from Saint Germain Trust. Now, let me differentiate, because I know we've talked a little bit about currency redemption.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we have two different programs. The money that will come to redeem these currencies that have been spoken of comes out of the heritage accounts. Now, those heritage funds were created immediately after World War II. They're under international treaties and so forth, so they have to be handled in a certain way. And those funds have been released for, particularly for redemption of these currencies. That's where those funds come from, the heritage accounts. And again, they're under treaty. They're handled by certain individuals. Like I say, well, I don't want to give the history of all that. I think I have before. But anyway, but on the other side, the implementation of Nesara and Gesara will actually be funds which are proffered or brought forward, from the Saint Germain Trust.
Mm-hmm.
So there's two different things going on. That's what I'm trying to explain.
Okay. Gesara is the international version of that. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, Gesara is global
Okay.
Nesara. So in any event, these things have all been planned for in these round tables, or whatever you want to call them, and many other plans, that can be made. So this is not just, willy-nilly happening. It's not happening by accident. It's happening on purpose through intent. And that's why I say that people who look at these things and participate in them should certainly get their intent in line with those who are bringing these things forward. Because if you don't, these things will be to your detriment instead of your benefit. Now, we've talked about money in the past and the use of it. And so, we've talked about stewardship. We've talked about being trustees of these things. And so people need to get their minds wrapped around these concepts, because the concept of unearned money will destroy you if you're not a good steward. And so again, money that you earn, you can do with it as you please. But money that you're a steward of, you have to understand the intent for which it was created, the intent for which you were placed into a stewardship position. Then I think things will go pretty good, for people if they'll look at it, from that point of view. Anyway, it starts talking about the bankroll programs. It talks about the around the turn of the century, children of the robber barons and banksters began to see the error in their parents' evilness and their use of wealth. These 100 children are known as wealthy visionaries. Together, they invested some of their family's monies into secret money roll programs to be used for humanitarian purposes. So the rising generation from those who had been involved in all these things were simply saying, hey, we don't exactly agree with what the old man was doing. And so we would like to do something useful. So they created what's known as roll programs. I think people who looked into some of these things have come upon that term, roll program. And I know people who've been involved in that. Anyway, the bank roll programs allow wealthy investors to make insane profits by ripping off the assets and resources from third world nations. And so again, some of these what they call bank trading programs use some of these techniques and so
Trading
forth.
platforms, you mean? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Is that, I think it's the same thing, right? I think that's the
Yeah. Anyway,
platforms.
even though the original 100 visionaries had a good intent, uh, it didn't work out the way they had hoped. And so in the late 1990s, the bankroll programs finally ceased. Anyway, the money from these bankroll programs became known as prosperity programs. I think people may have come upon that term, prosperity programs. And over time, the programs were secretly opened up to small investors.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew some of those who had tried to get into that.
Mm-hmm.
They did get into it,
Likewise.
but they never got anything from it. Put it that way.
Well, the money was always taken.
Yeah.
Isn't that right?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was taken.
And a lot of people got in a little bit of trouble legally for some of that stuff. You know, one fellow I knew who was working in some of those areas.
Mm-hmm.
He had been called in as a witness on the prosecution against somebody who had been involved in some of the roll programs.
Okay.
And so they mistakenly called this guy in as a witness, thinking that he was going to expose something.
Mm-hmm.
His testimony from the witness stand basically was, yes, these things are real. And the prosecutor, starts to get livid.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, how do you know these things are real? He said, well, I have the personal phone number of George W. Bush and Alan Greenspan right here in my wallet. We'll call them. Right from the witness stand, he says.
Right.
So the prosecutor got him off that witness stand in a big hurry and said, get out here, don't come back no more.
Well, it is, they're supposedly on the Federal Reserve Board, and only apparently the people who were on the Federal Reserve
Yeah.
Board were able to actually do those trades. From what I understand, is that correct, Winston?
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of crazy stuff that went on, in that area. Again, it had to do with intent.
Mm-hmm.
And so, again, to control the narrative and also to control the funds themselves, you have all these criminals that jump in the middle of it.
Right.
For instance, it says here, even the Bush family had their hands in the pot using Promise software. I think a lot of people have heard of that.
Oh.
So they could transfer stolen funds without being traced. Many have died because of it as well. But God has another plan for humanity. Okay, so this author is saying the time has come, to release the prosperity funds. There was a lot of that going on with
Whoa.
Bush Jr. and Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah, the distribution of those who had participated in the prosperity programs was tried to be paid out to them. And there were packages that were being sent with the information how to claim it, different things. And Bush Jr. and Obama both were hijacking those things, not allowing them to be delivered because they did not want the people to have prosperity. I mean, for crying out loud. I mean, this is why the interim government had to be set up by the military to come forward, because Obama just took us right onto the brink of complete disaster. That's why it had to happen. Anyway, 250 years compound interest mushroomed into world trust, into net worth in excess of one quattordecim. Anyway, look at all those numbers there.
Yeah, it's 40 zeros.
Yeah, it's a whole bunch of zeros out there. 40 zeros behind it. And that's enough money to buy a gold cube the size of the orbit of Saturn.
Yeah.
If it could be had. I mean, again, these are numbers. This is not real money. These are numbers.
Okay.
Okay. Then this article talks about the distribution of how this will happen. It goes through, all these levels. And you can read these articles. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time going over these articles. Uh, and then it gets down into corporate trust, parity program trust. And then finally, it says the funds will be released to the common man. And there'd be, certain designated safe banks and, blah, blah, blah. It says it changes on the horizon. It begins with Nesara. And it goes on to point out that a lot of the information on the internet certainly is disinformation. And it is. I mean, back in early 2000 period of time, when this started to be known around, there was one particular individual that came on the internet known as the Dove of Oneness. And she was a scam artist, but she was trying to scam using, the prospects of Nesara. And like I say, I understand she's dead now, which is probably a good thing. But she tried to scam one of my friends, and he called me up one day because he had a lot of funds. And he called me up one day, and he was working with some colonel, military colonel. I'm not sure. I think he was the Army. But anyway, so he starts asking me about this lady, and I said, stay away from her. I said, she's a scam artist. And later on, it was proven to him that she was. And like I say, the only problem was, she was really stupid, not checking people out. We tried to scam them because this friend of mine is an international assassin.
International assassin.
Yeah.
Across the wrong person. Oh, this came up in one of our
Yeah.
roundtables, I think, with Benjamin Fulford. We were talking about this. Remember that interview?
Yeah, Devil Oneness, they called her.
You didn't say the name, but Benjamin Fulford knew who you were talking about. Apparently, she scammed him too.
She was well known. She was
Yeah.
well known in the circles we were running with. But she was, she really should have done some background on some of the people she was trying to scam, because this guy told her that if you don't stop, she said, he told her, he said, you're going to get a bullet right between your eyes. And he'd have done it. I'm telling you, you got to be careful who you do business with. Like I say, this particular fella I'm talking about, let me put it this way. When the boys from Palermo come to visit, he chauffeurs them around. The boys from Palermo, the mafia godfathers, the Sicilians.
Yeah.
Matter of fact, the last time that they came that I know anything about, he was telling me about it, because they were mad at Steve Wynn. Steve Wynn had built those casinos and towers and all that kind of stuff, but he built it on their land, and they hadn't given permission for it. So they had come to Las Vegas to have a little chat. And so pretty soon we find that Steve Wynn said, I'm tired of all this stuff. I'm just going. I think he retired, as it were, to some tropical island or something.
I bet.
when the boys from Palermo show up, people in Las Vegas set up and take notice. I'll put it that way. We talked about a little bit about that, when we talked about organized crime, Mo Dalis, and all that bunch.
Yeah.
So anyway, this lady, the Devil Oneness, tried to scam the guy that's the chauffeur for the boy from Palermo. How stupid can you be? So anyway, you run into all these kind of stupid things, that go on. But anyway, the point being that a lot of the information that people would find on the internet is disinformation.
Yeah.
So it would take a close study. And so some of these articles I'm bringing up here, I believe to be correct information. Okay. Now, is everything they say exactly right? I can't say, but I'm just trying to say that there is correct information, and then there's a lot of BS. So be careful. I mean, when you look at some of these things, evaluate them and look into your heart to see what resonates. Then I think you won't be misled.
Well, I just hope, Winston, that also, like, Saint Germain found at the time he wasn't going to be able to use the money for what he wanted it to. I hope that we're not going to be stopped for people who are recipients of these funds and are trying to do humanitarian work, that they won't be stopped, because previously, we have over 5,000 patents held by the United States Patent Office on technologies that we could use, that we
Yeah.
really need. And that has to stop. Those shenanigans have to stop. And I think they will with these mass arrests. We'll see. I heard that they were going to be unsealed on June 11th. That's what one of the dates is that's floating around. But we'll wait. We'll see. We'll find out.
Yeah. Well, the fact that they will be unsealed is inevitable.
Sure.
Yeah. So if it's June the 11th or sometime after that, whenever, but it's imminent.
Yeah.
It's imminent. So we're at the point, we're at the 11th hour, 59 minutes, 58 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
That's where we are. That's how close it is. All right. Anyway,
We're ready.
yeah, we're ready. Anyway, then they want to go into the history of Nesara. So I want to cut off this particular article and bring up another article which has a very good explanation of this.
I just mean we're ready for these healing technologies. We're ready for
Yeah.
better, cleaner transportation, cleaner, renewable resources, and it's we're ready.
Well, we're soon to announce. Like I say, I'm working with an individual, who's not projecting, that we're going to develop med beds. He already has it, has the technology, and we once the funding is there, we'll start to distribute. And he already has at least 1 million all over the world.
Wow.
Prospective distributors of the technology. And so, but what he said was, before someone would be allowed to use the technology, they'd have to come in for about a 2 or 3 week training
Right.
at how to use these things. He said then after they have been trained, then they would be evaluated. Now he said depending on that evaluation would be the level to which they're actually able to use the technology.
Hmm.
In other words, if someone is only 75% competent after training, then the equipment that they would have would only allow them to be use it at that level, or someone's is completely competent, then they would be allowed to use that equipment at 100% level. So we have the technology. It's not something that's going to be developed. We already have the technology. And also, along with this equipment, he said we have, little boxes about yay big that will supply all of the energy to run these. He said, so we can take these things into areas that don't have electricity.
Excellent.
He says they're self-contained. Now, these things are not under patent. Okay, they're not being suppressed by the patent office. All right. So just as soon as this funding becomes available, we'll swing into operation with these things, start to manufacture them in mass, and start to hold training sessions for the technicians who would be using them. Now, once we get this rolling, we'll announce it. So this is something good to look forward to, folks.
Oh,
like
you
I
bet.
say.
You bet.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. Is this the way Randy Kramer described it? What exactly is this? Are we talking about, repairing DNA? Are we talking about restoring, regenerating limbs? Are we talking about?
Both of those, and also he mentioned that as a part of the process, it'll start at least to transform carbon-based into crystalline-based.
Mm-hmm. What happens to wrinkles, Winston? Everybody wants to know what happens to wrinkles. And did they say? Does it say?
Yeah,
Did it tell you?
he kind of gave the idea you can actually regress the body back physically to
Age regression.
the prime of your life, if that's what you want.
You want to get the cellulite off, and you want
Say like,
this,
yeah.
you want the skin to go up a little bit,
Well, I
tighten it
don't
up
know.
a
I've worked for a long time for this white hair. I'm not really sure I'm willing to give it up.
little.
But anyway, I would like to be able to run and jump and do the things I did when I was younger. Anyway, those are things
Right.
that can be worked with. But the main thing is as we start to move into, because Scott Warner had talked about a time period that
Mm,
would be necessary to move us into a position so that we could ascend. And so when we start to talk about regeneration of physicality,
mhm,
and then also moving from carbon-based life into crystalline-based, yeah, it's going to take a little time. And so when we start to talk about 1 million distributors and technicians using this technology across the planet, then it's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a little bit of work. And so people need to figure on rolling up their sleeves
mhm.
and 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 going to work.
We have
That's
to,
what's
but
going
you
to
have to
happen.
make sure that people's intentions are good because not everybody has good intentions, and you know that they will weaponize anything. There's people who will do that. I
Not
know.
anymore.
You have to have
We
like a frequency. It's kind of like what we heard about the Busegi Mountains. You have to have a certain frequency, or you can't even enter the facility, and it's guarded by, some high, very high dimen
Yeah.
frequency individuals.
Well, there are changes being made on the whole planet.
Yeah.
uh, and some of those changes, that are being worked on,
Mhm.
are not apparent, at a third dimensional vibration, but the changes have been made. And so we need to ascend, as it were, and change our frequency so that we can move into those things. Now, that change in people would be facilitated by getting rid of some of the chemtrail coughs
You
and,
bet.
and other things which have plagued our physical bodies. And then certainly as we start to move into a crystalline based structure or crystalline based body, then we would be prepared to move into a fifth dimensional physicality. And so these things that are being brought forward will facilitate that.
It's getting dark over here. We're getting a thunderstorm coming through.
All right. Well, we'll deal with this. Maybe we better hurry up then, so we don't get interrupted by the storm.
It's okay. We're
Anyway,
just, as long as the lighting's okay. Is the lighting
yeah,
okay?
let's look at this next
Mhm.
article here. Uh,
Well, I can't wait for those med beds to come out. Oh boy, after, never mind. Go ahead.
okay. Well, we're all looking for those
Yeah.
kind of things. So but it's not an idle desire. We're
No, not
getting
that.
very close to that.
No, it's not that. It's just that you want to function normally. That's all. You want to
It'd be good,
repair.
yeah. It'd be
I mean, I
helpful.
had like two reconstructive surgeries on my ankle. It'd be really great that I could just do everything I used to do. You know,
Oh yeah,
that would
oh
be
yeah.
nice. Just restoring normality. I mean, I'm not looking, we're not talking becoming Barbies, and we know there's people out there who want to do that, but that's not what this is for.
Okay, I don't think I want to be a Barbie or a Ken.
Well,
Anyway,
that's what I'm
I just
saying.
want to be
Oh
me.
no, did you see that on Facebook? No, there's a woman who's like this like man and woman went to plastic surgeon. They look so plastic and fake. It's not even funny, but they wanted that and I don't know why, but people do things like that. That's the only
Melanie.
reason I made that point because like you said, it's not for that
All
reason.
right, well, let's get on with this one. This is called The History of Nesara,
Okay.
or the National Economic Security and Reformation Act. Now, this was compiled by someone who has credentials.
Uh-huh.
This lady, her name is Nancy Detweiler, and she has a master's degree in education and some other kind of degrees and so forth. So this is not a stupid hillbilly putting this out. This is somebody who is a researcher, an educated person, who did the
Uh,
research on this.
okay, now after what happened with Roseanne, you better not offend anybody. Not all hillbillies. Now you just got to be politically correct here, Winston.
Well, I am a hillbilly. I can say anything about them I want to.
No, you still might insult someone. It's okay. We're not going to cancel our program. Keep going. Sorry.
I know, I know.
This crazy world, okay?
Yeah, I'm about as politically correct as a tree stump.
Yeah,
I don't know how to be politically correct.
good.
Anyway, so the note says that writing a history of Nesara requires locating the separate dots and attempting to put them together to create truth. The original documents are sequestered. That's true.
Hmm.
And those individuals directly involved are still under a strict gag order. Now, this lady says, I have used my foundation, a history written by James Rink. You can find him on the internet. So my research set out to prove Nesara by locating original documents and articles written by reputable people that illustrated each of the tenets. I have inserted some of the URLs for these tenets into Rink's history. In my 7+ years of research, I have found nothing. Repeat, in my 7+ years of research, I have found nothing to disprove the existence of Nesara law. The internet is loaded with disinformation that can be easily dismissed by research. See what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
This lady, 7 years she worked on this research. She says she can't find anything that disproves it. And that's what she was looking for. Anyway, the internet's loaded with disinformation that can be easily dismissed by research. As you read this history, you will find mention of high officials being cloned.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's talk about cloning just for a moment. I don't want to get into it too deeply, but like this CIA guy, that I had known some years ago, he told me. He said, "Yeah, they've been able to clone human bodies since the 50s."
Mm-hmm.
Now he was last working with the CIA, I would guess, in the 90s. So he was reporting on what they had by the 90s. And he said, "Yeah." He said at that point, he says they could completely clone a full human body in 36 hours.
Well, that's what the movie Avatar was
Yeah,
revealing. It was disclosure. It was soft disclosure of this. Yeah, that's how they
yeah.
do it.
So that, I mean, it works. It's really terrible that they don't disclose the technology, because let's say somebody needs an organ transplant, a heart, a liver, a kidney, or whatever. They go looking all over the planet to see if they can find some match for it. Well, with the techniques they have, they can reproduce a totally viable new heart with just 2 or 3 cells off the old heart.
Hmm.
Why are they looking all over the planet for a match when they could easily create a new organ?
Right, from stem cells or something. Exactly.
Not from stem cells, but from just taking a few cells from the old heart. It would be a complete match, is what I'm saying.
Right, exactly. Hmm.
Yeah, see, but there's no money. There's more money to be made by doing it the other way, and so that's why they do it.
Exactly. Hmm.
It's terrible.
Yep.
Uh, it says the capacity to clone an adult individual signifies just one of the many secrets withheld from the public. Cloning of an adult individual is used for various reasons by those working behind the scenes. One example will become known as the Divine Right movement, the cloning of Princess Diana to avoid her death. Ain't that interesting?
Hmm.
Another example is to clone a public figure to prevent public reaction to he being removed from their position, as occurred with Janet Reno. She gets into that just in a minute here.
Hmm.
It says now that information regarding the government military cover-up of the extraterrestrial presence is in the public domain, we can see parallels of the facets regarding Nesara that many have used to discredit it. Some of these are deliberate cover-up of information, government gag orders, the suspicious deaths of persons who attempted to tell the truth and control the media, and the ruining of individual lives and professions. Now, and this goes on all the time. Okay, but then she goes on to say, I encourage all to do your own research and add to the pool of documented evidence on the truth of Nesara. Now is the perfect time for Nesara to be released to the world. All right, then she goes into some of the history that has led up to the necessity. She talks about the Banker's Manifesto of 1892. Like I said, I don't want to read through all this. She goes through a short history, talks about, what opposition, like U.S. Congressman Charles Lindbergh, the father of Lucky Lindy. She goes into, some of the things about the Federal Reserve Act, World Banking Empire. And she has a URL here you can go look up. She provides some of the information that she came across in her research, but people can go and look at the very things she's talking about. So again, this is not a conjecture on her part. She's giving you the information that you can go look it up for yourself. Mm-hmm. You don't have to, listen to people like me, going on and on about it. Anyway, it talks about the prior to 1933, the Federal Reserve notes, as they were called, were backed by gold. This changed under the new law, and we've talked about this, about what happened in 1933. Here's one we've talked about in the past. The Banker's Manifesto ties in with U.S. Senate document number 43, which states the ultimate ownership of all properties in the state. Individual so-called ownership is only by virtue of government. See, this is what we were overcoming, right, with the technology we presented in Reclaiming Your Status and Assets DVD. Right. First off, number one, you want to own your own body. And then we go through and show how that could be extended to other things, such as your home, your car, or whatever. Okay. So that's what that DVD, and and a lot of people have taken interest in that. Yeah. And I encourage those who don't understand a little bit about that, go to our website. You can find the DVD there. It's for a nominal price. It is just a little bit complicated, some of the points of it, but and I get quite a number of emails from people who aren't familiar with some of the particular aspects of technology in that. But I'm happy to explain some of those things. So, if you get the DVD, if you have questions about it, send me an email and I'll try to explain it as best I can, depending on what level of understanding you have on some of the particular technology. But it's not that difficult. It really isn't. Anyway, going along, 1970s, Federal Land Bank illegally foreclosed on farmers' mortgages all through the Midwest. In each of these cases, the farmers were defrauded by the banks with the approval of the Federal Reserve System. These court cases would eventually become known as Farmer Claims Program. Now, this is important. Anyway, in 1978, elderly ranch farmer in Colorado purchased a farm with loan from the Federal Land Bank. After he died, he tried to pass on the property to his son, Roy Swasinger Jr., who was a retired military general. Then it says soon after, a federal land bank officer and federal marshals appeared on his property and informed him the bank was foreclosing on his farm, ordering him to vacate within 30 days. Without his knowledge, his deceased father had signed a stipulation that reverted the property back to the Federal Land Bank in the event of the borrower's death. Okay, again, this is all done in the fiction, folks, because again, we've talked about titles, straw man titles, and all these kind of things. So all these agreements that were done with the federal land bank and so forth were all done by the straw man. It's all fiction. It's all fraud. Anyway, outraged, Roy Swassenger filed a class action lawsuit in Denver federal court system. The suit was dismissed on the basis of incorrect filing. No big deal. This prompted Roy to investigate into the inner workings of the banking system. So, okay, so here's a guy that has a lot of experience. He's obviously a very talented individual. He had risen all the way to the rank of general. So though he's not some, dumb ground pounder like what I was. Okay, this is a guy who has real talent, real skills. He was made a general. And this is back when being a general meant something. Trust me. Anyway, so Roy was given a contract by the U.S. Senate and later Supreme Court to investigate banking fraud. But because he was under a strict non-disclosure order, he was not allowed to tell the media what he discovered. In the late 80s, he began sharing his knowledge with others, including high-ranking military personnel who helped him bring about a class action lawsuit against the federal government. Again, this is United States Incorporated. That's who he's going against.
Right.
All right, the first of these lawsuits began in the mid-1980s when these folks, last name of Baskerville of Fort Collins, were involved in a bankruptcy case with First Interstate Bank of Fort Collins, who were trying to foreclose on their farm. At a restaurant, their lawyer informed them that he would no longer be able to help them. He simply walked away. Now, why do you think that attorney did that?
Well, because he knew he knew it was corruption.
He'd been gotten to.
Yeah.
He'd been warned. Anyway, overhearing the conversation, Roy offered his advice on how to appeal the case in bankruptcy court. So this is one of the things we've used a lot too on mortgage foreclosures and stuff, is we, put people into Chapter 13 bankruptcies as a holding action. Because you see, a lot of people don't understand that once you get into a bankruptcy, then you can sue a civil suit. It's an adversarial suit within the bankruptcy itself in federal bankruptcy court. And so, there's, like I say, we've kind of developed a lot of this technology along the way to help people. And sometimes it helps, sometimes it doesn't, depending again on the skill level. People are constantly writing to me and asking me, will I, participate in their case? And I keep saying, no, I can't.
Yeah.
I don't have time, first off. But
Right.
second off, my business is about education. So I can teach you how to handle some of these situations and so forth. Then it's the responsibility of the individual to study the technology and the techniques and so forth. Because like I say, the old saying is every tub's got to stand on its own bottom. You got to stand up for yourself. I can't stand up for you. You got to stand up for yourself. Now I can give you hints, clues, education, and so forth that would be helpful. But I won't. Like I say, one guy came to me one time and said, can you kill a mortgage? And I said, yeah. He said, will you kill mine for me? I said, no. I said, I'll teach you how to do it. He said, why? I said, because if I did it for you, I'd have to come and live at your house for about 6 months. Because I knew he wouldn't answer the mail. I knew he wouldn't take the steps. So I'd have to be there, when the mail got there to deal with it. That's why I told him, I said, no, I'll teach you how to do it, but you got to do it yourself. Otherwise, I'm going to have to expend a great deal of time and effort. And I can't do that because as an educator, I'm trying to affect many people.
Exactly.
And not just one or two here or there. So that's the position, that I constantly take. I'm constantly being asked to do that. And I constantly say, no, I can't.
Right.
Not because I'm being mean, but there's two things. But the main thing is that people need to stand up for themselves, take responsibility to become self-empowered. because we don't need a lot of people depending on Winston. We need a lot of people depending on themselves.
Themselves, exactly.
So it's a win, lose, or draw. But after it's all over with, either you're going to be crushed or you're going to become self-empowered. And I get many reports from people saying, how much better they feel about themselves, having stood up for themselves. You see what I mean? So anyway, so Roy's wanting to help these Baskerville folks. So 1988, Denver federal court system ruled that indeed the banks had defrauded the Baskervilles and proceeded to reverse its bankruptcy decision. But when the foreclosed property was not returned, they filed a new lawsuit. Eventually, 23 other farmers, ranchers, and Indians, or native people, they use the word Indians, and I hope nobody's offended by that use of that word. Anyway, so apparently there's some of the native people that were affected by this very thing as well. Anyway, so several of them joined in the case, so it became a class action type thing. I personally don't approve of class actions, but in this case here, it seemed to work. Said in these cases, the banks were foreclosing on the properties using fraudulent methods. Listen, that's a really an oxymoron. Anything the bank does is a fraudulent action. So anyway, they were using exorbitant interest, illegal foreclosure, or by not crediting mortgage payments to their accounts as they should have, but instead would steal the mortgage payments for themselves, triggering foreclosure on the property. Now we've run into this. I think I've told some of those stories of how we overcome it. Anyway, this is not a discussion on mortgages. This is on Nesara, so I don't want to get off onto all that.
Yep.
But anyway, after running out of money, they continue their fight without the help of lawyers. Thank God. With some assistance by the Farmers Union, a new lawsuit was filed against the Federal Land Bank and the Farmers Credit System. And here's the case number. If you can find it, here's the case number. Now, it probably got sealed, but there's the case number if you can dig it out. It says the district court ruled in their favor and ordered the banks to return the stolen properties with help from either the federal marshals or the National Guard. I mean, they're going to come in with guns to get these farms and stuff restored to these people because of the court order. The court had ordered it, but the bank said, "Screw you, screw the court. We're going to do what we wanted to do." And so finally, they said, "Well, okay, we're going to come in with guns then." Anyway, but when no payments were made, the farmers declared involuntary Chapter 7 bankruptcy against the Federal Land Bank and the Farmers Credit System. Now, I think probably what would have been more appropriate in this instance, even though I don't think they considered this, was based upon that order, they should have put the banks into an involuntary bankruptcy. That's how I would have handled that. Anyway, that's just me. Anyway, the banks appealed their case, insisting they were not a business, but a federal agency. Therefore, they were not liable to pay the damages. So the farmers' legal team adopted a new strategy. According to the Federal Land Bank's 1933 charter, they are not allowed to make loans directly to applicants, but instead could only back loans as guarantor in the case of default. Now, again, we've talked about some of these understandings about sureties and all these kind of things. And that's why we've gone into, so many of the discussions we've had over the past interviews that we've done and so forth. I'm hoping to get, basic understanding into people so that when they look at something like this, they'll have, at least a little fundamental working knowledge so they'll understand what's being done. Anyway, because the Federal Land Bank had violated this rule, the farmers' legal team was able to successfully sue the bank for damages. Word of the lawsuit began to spread. The legal team would teach others how to fight foreclosure and help them file lawsuits as well. And then, then of course we had, Willie Nelson raising money, through doing farm aid concerts. I think Willie should be applauded for that.
Yeah,
But of
absolutely.
course, for his effort, who attacked him? The
Oh, the government.
IRS.
Yeah, the government went after him.
Yeah, the IRS went after him, to get him stopped,
Mm.
and I think they successfully bankrupted him. About 2 years ago, I went to a concert down here in Oregon, and old Willie was there.
Uh,
Willie was the headliner.
he just canceled one of his shows. He
Yeah,
got the flu
he's
or
getting way
something.
too old. Like I say,
92 or something? 90.
well, he's an
Yeah.
icon.
Yeah.
And people went, listen. He was so old, his voice was gone,
Mm.
so he didn't do that much singing. Basically, he talked his way through the songs. He could still play that guitar, though. I tell you what, man, he could hit them licks on that guitar just like nobody's business. Anyway, old Willie, I think we should remember him for his good works. I mean, he smokes dope and all that kind of stuff, like a lot of musicians do. But anyway, old Willie should be remembered for his goodwill, helping the farmers. So
That's good.
anyway, so the Baskerville case became the Farmers Claims Action lawsuit. Worried about the legal ramifications, the government retaliated against the farmers, hitting them with either outrageous IRS fees or by imprisoning the legal team under frivolous, non-related charges.
Hmm.
When the farmers realized they were being unfairly targeted, they had the military generals, such as General Roy Swassenger, sit in the courtroom to make sure the bribed judges would vote according to constitutional law.
Hmm.
Because why?
Because he knew that the banks were.
Because if a military officer sees a civilian
Hmm.
officer breaking the law, they can arrest them and take them before a courts martial.
All right, as a provost, right?
Now we had talked about these sealed indictments.
Yes.
That's exactly how they're going to be handled.
Hmm.
The arrest will be made by the military.
Hmm.
They'll be taken before a military tribunal and charged. And if their treason is serious enough, we're looking at firing squads.
So you're saying that if these judgments, and even probably current cases that are pending, um, if judges are not following the law, then they can be subject to court martial.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, see, because
Good.
they swore an oath
Mm.
to the Constitution. If you swear an oath and then you break your oath, what's it called? Treason.
Treason.
What do military tribunals typically deal with? Treason.
That's it. High treason.
So the last I heard, there's something like 29,000,
Hmm.
about
Yeah.
29,000 sealed indictments. Guess who's on all those?
Is Roy Schwarzenegger on there?
No.
What do you mean? I'm not following you.
Who do you think are involved as defendants in these 29,000 sealed indictments?
Oh, the New Republic.
All federal judges, all federal prosecutors, probably about the good part of the Senate and House of Representatives, the
As
deep state,
defendants. Yeah, not
on
as.
and on and on it
I thought
goes.
you meant who was prosecuting it.
Oh
Sorry.
no,
I
no,
wasn't
no, it's
sure
not
which way
Roy.
you were asking the question.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. Yeah, no.
Right, exactly. Good.
Yeah.
Woohoo. I saw there was about like 100. I don't know. Last time I counted, it's not updated though. It was about 186 in New Jersey. So I'm looking to see who's on that list.
Well, the ones you're dealing with are on that list.
Yeah.
They won't be there much longer.
Yeah, I haven't talked about this on Goldfish Report ever,
Well,
but
that's
I will
okay.
one
You don't
day.
need to.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so once all this happened, so they got high military people like General Roy Schwarzenegger to sit in the courtroom and make sure the judges acted right.
Mhm.
Anyway, the farmers now, with a large team of knowledgeable people of the law behind them, filed a new case to claim additional damages from the fraudulent loaning activities of the farmers' credit system. The government tried to settle, but they had already lost many cases and were now losing the appeals as well. Can you hold that for just a minute so I can cough?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay, yeah, I just had to clear my throat a little bit. Early in the morning, it takes me a little bit of time to get functional. Anyway, let's go along with this a little bit. See, this is pretty much what we had talked about in one of our last interviews about rule by corporation, what's called fascism. And this article here is,
Right.
once you understand that, then the research this lady did will certainly, make a lot more sense to you, because it says here not only was farmers credit system not chartered to do business with the American Banking Association, but so were other quasi-government organizations,
Mm.
such as Federal Housing Administration, the FHA, Department of Housing and Urban Development,
Mm.
uh, and even the Federal Reserve Bank. See, you remember we did those liens against the Federal Reserve, 12 Federal
Yes.
Reserve banks back in 2012, which prevented them from rechartering?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, see, there are
Rechartering.
things that
Right.
can be done.
Right.
Anyway, the farmer claims lawsuit was thrown out of court at each level, with the records purposely destroyed. An example of these court cases may be viewed at, and then she gives a place you can go and look at these things. This lady did great research on this. So this is not, just Winston in his own way trying to tell about these things. This lady did the research on it. She said, okay, go look over here. Go look over here. So this is, a good report.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, in the early 1990s, Roy brought the case before the United States Supreme Court. Some of the content of this case is sealed from public eyes, but most of it can be viewed today. The, the U.S. Supreme Court justices ruled that the Farmers Union claims were indeed valid. Therefore, all property foreclosed by the farmers' credit system was illegal, and all those who were foreclosed on would have to receive damages. In addition, they ruled that the U.S. federal government and banks had defrauded the farmers and all U.S. citizens. Now, remember, we've defined U.S. citizens. Anyway, all U.S. citizens out of vast sums of money and property.
Right.
Furthermore, the court ruled the shocking truth that the IRS was a Puerto Rican trust.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a reference. Go look it up, folks. In addition, the court ruled that the Federal Reserve was unlawful. Here it is. Go look it up. That the income tax amendment was only ratified by 4 states and therefore was not a legal amendment, and that the IRS code was not enacted into positive law within the Code of Federal Regulations. It's not there. It was not enacted properly. Anyway, not getting off on that.
Mm-hmm.
And that the U.S. government illegally foreclosed on farmers' homes with help from federal agencies. Irrefutable proof was presented by a retired CIA agent.
Mm.
He provided testimony and records of the bank's illegal activities as further evidence that the farmers' union's claims were indeed legitimate. The implications of such a decision were profound. Well, yeah, I guess it was profound.
Truly. Mm-hmm.
All gold, silver, and property titles taken by the Federal Reserve and the IRS must be returned to the people. And that's why I've said when Nesara comes back in, when Nesara is actually enacted,
Mm-hmm.
all the people who are given any kind of money to the IRS in any form, property, money, or whatever, will be returned to you. The interim government now has control of the IRS computers.
Well, there was a report. I don't know if you saw this, but there was a report out talking about. I can't verify it, but that someone's spouse worked at the IRS and they were just given a 30-day
Yeah, that
notice.
lady from that Utah lady, she said that.
Was that from, yeah, that was who it was.
Uh-huh.
Uh, yeah.
Yeah,
So we'll see. But you said it's the end of the IRS anyway. So this is, he was told to
yeah,
look for another job. He would not have a job in 30 days. That's what he was told.
yeah.
So it's good.
Okay, the legal team sought assistance from a small group of benevolent visionaries consisting of politicians, military generals, and business people who have been secretly working to restore the Constitution since the telling the military to be prepared in case something happens. And that's why we have the interim republic right now. It's because it's been known and worked on since the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
And then, people like Drake Bailey, he was exposed to this right after Vietnam, so he's had good knowledge of these kind of things since the mid 70s certainly. And many of us have come upon this information over a period of time. Anyway, 1991, with the help of covert congressional and political pressure, Bush Sr. issued an executive order which provided a provision allowing anyone who has a claim against the federal government to receive payment as long as within the rules of the original format of the case.
Mm.
Here's the executive order you can read. You can go look this up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
According to the Federal Reserve Act 1913, all present and succeeding debt against the United States Treasury must be assumed by the Federal Reserve. Now, I don't know if you got it back up, but, go on that one time when we went and analyzed the plan of the experts. Go back and review some of those things. And then some of these things that are happening will start to make sense to you. Like I say, this is a very complex problem.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, over the interviews that we've done, I've tried to open all these things up, for an understanding, certainly by going back in history and showing you how it all started.
Exactly.
And then you get down here to these Farm Claims Act and all these kind of things, and it will start to make a little bit of sense. You see what I mean?
Yes. You referred to this before, that you did
Yeah.
refer to this in our previous report. So this is the first time you went into the detail of it, though. Yeah.
Yeah, to collect damages, the farmers' legal team used an obscure attachment to the 14th Amendment, which most people are not aware of. After the government allowed citizens to claim a payment on anyone who had suffered damages as a result of the federal government failing to protect its citizens from harm or damages by a foreign government.
Mm-hmm.
See, it all started, like I said, in the past, all this prosperity program and stuff started when? Right after the Civil War. Anyway, and people say, what are you talking about? Anyway, President Grant had this attachment sealed from public eyes, but somehow someone on the farmers' legal team got a hold of it.
Mm-hmm.
If you read that carefully, it specifies damages by a foreign government. That foreign government is the corporate federal government, which had been masquerading to the public as constitutional government. That would be the United States Incorporated out of Puerto Rico. These things are real, folks. We're not making this stuff up. Anyway, going back to the Organic Act of 1871 and then Trading with the Enemy Acts of 1933, which defined all citizens as enemy combatants under the federal system known as the United States. The justices and farmers' legal team recognized how evil and corrupt our federal government had become. Mm-hmm. And to counteract this, they added some provisions in the settlement to bring the government back under control of first, they would be paid using a lawful currency, mm-hmm. backed by gold and silver as the Constitution dictates. This would eliminate inflation and gyrating economic cycles created by the Federal Reserve System. Secondly, they would be required to go back to common law instead of admiralty law under the gold fringe flags. Under common law, if there is no damage or harm done, then there's no violation of the law. This would eliminate millions of laws which are used to control the masses and protect corrupt politicians, such as the United States Code. The United States Code is all pure fiction. All pure fiction. Mm-hmm. Lastly, the IRS would be dismantled and replaced with a national sales tax. This is the basis of the Nesara law. Mm-hmm. All right, so we're starting to understand now how this whole thing developed. Now, when the legal team finally settled on the figure, each individual will receive an average of $20 million payout per claim. Again, in gold-backed currency. When will that payout be available? When they put out United States notes.
Right, that's the gold-backed currency. Exactly.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Multiplied by a total of 336,000 claims that were filed against the U.S. federal government, the total payout would come out to be a staggering $6.6 trillion in dollars. Okay, the U.S. Supreme Court placed a gag order on the case, struck all information from the Federal Registry, and placed all records in the Supreme Court files. Up to that point, Senator Sam Nunn had kept the Baskerville case records within his office. A settlement was agreed to out of court, then the decision was sealed by Janet Reno.
Mm-hmm.
Because the case was sealed, claimants are not allowed to share court documents to media outlets without violating the settlement, but they can still tell others about the lawsuit. This is probably why you've never heard about this. Okay, in 91, Ray Schwarzenegger went before a Senate committee to present evidence of the bank and government's criminal activity. Remember,
Mm-hmm.
the Congress had given him a contract
Right.
to do this.
Mm-hmm.
He was under contract to do this. So in 1991, Roy went before a Senate committee to present evidence of the bank's and government's criminal activity. He informed them how the corporation of the United States was tied to the establishment of a new world order, which would bring about a fascist one world government ruled by the international bankers.
Amazing.
1992, the task force was put together consisting of over 300 retired and 35 active U.S. military officers who strongly supported constitutional law. This task force was responsible for investigating government officials, congressional officers, judges, and the Federal Reserve.
Mm-hmm.
Then it named some of the ones who were involved in that. One of them is the director, former director of the CIA, William Colby. You know what happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
They uncovered the common practice of bribery and extortion committed by both senators and judges. The criminal activity was so rampant that only 2 out of 535 members of the Congress were deemed honest.
Mm-hmm.
For hell's sakes.
Mm-hmm. Totally corrupted.
But more importantly, they carried out the first ever audit of the Federal Reserve. The audit didn't do much. It showed certain things, but it didn't do much until we came into that lean. We came into that lean in 2012, and things really started to get interesting, put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Then it talks about, as a result of the audit, it was demonstrated, contrary to federal government propaganda, they also discovered that most nations had in fact owed money to the United States instead of the other way around. These hidden trillions were then confiscated and placed into European bank accounts in order to generate enormous funds needed to pay the farmers' claims class action lawsuit. Later, this money would become the basis of the prosperity programs. Despite these death blows, President Bush Sr. and the Illuminati continued on with their plans for global enslavement. So in 1992, military officers confronted Bush and demanded he sign an agreement that he would return to the United States to constitutional law, and ordered him to never use the term New World Order again. Bush Sr. pretended to cooperate, but secretly planned to bring about the New World Order anyway by signing an executive order on the Christmas Day of 1992 that would have indefinitely closed all banks, giving Bush an excuse to declare martial law. Under the chaos of martial law, Bush intended to reinstall a new constitution that would keep everybody currently in office in their same position for 25 years, and it would have removed all rights to elect new officials. The military intervened to stop Bush from signing the executive order. That was in 92. Now, they tried the same thing. Bush Jr. tried the same crap in 2006. A lot of people don't know that. And so there's certain things that I was involved in to put a stop to that too. I mean, I know about these things, been involved in them. That's why the government hates me. The only thing I can say is tough shit. Anyway, in 93, members of the Supreme Court, certain members of Congress, and representatives from the Clinton government met with high-ranking U.S. military officers who were demanding a return to constitutional law, reforms in the banking system, and financial redress. They agreed to create the farm claims process that would allow the legal team to set up meetings all over the country on a grassroots level to help others file claims and to educate them about the lawsuit. See, what was it say up here? About 336,000 claims were actually put in.
Right.
A claim of harm can be made on any loan issued by a financial institution for all interest paid, foreclosures, attorneys, and court fees, IRS taxes or liens, real estate and property taxes, mental and emotional, stress, blah, blah, blah. But the Clinton government undermined their efforts by requiring the farm claims to use a specific form designed by the government. This form imposed an administrative fee of $300 for each claim, which was later used in '94 as a basis to arrest the leaders of the legal team, including Roy Swassenger.
Oh, jeez. Unbelievable.
Yeah. The government was so afraid of what they would say during their trial in Michigan that extra steps were taken to conceal the true nature of the case. County courthouse employees were not allowed to work between Monday and Thursday during the course of the trial. And outside the courthouse, FBI agents swarmed the perimeter, preventing the media and visitors from learning what was going on as well. This is this Gestapo crap here, folks.
Absolutely. This is where we were going.
Harassment and retaliation by the government increased. Many were sent to prison or murdered while incarcerated. Mm-hmm. Despite being protected by his military personnel, the Army general who acquired the original 1933 as title of the bankruptcy of the United States, he was in prison, killed, and replaced with a clone. The clone was then used as a decoy, blah, blah, blah.
Well, you did talk about this in one of our previous reports, even recently, that there were many unsung heroes, many people who've been involved in this process to right the government back on the right path, and who were taken out and whose names people will never know. But they will. That's true. But they did, in fact. It wasn't in vain, though. Their efforts still contributed to where we are today, where we're going with this. So.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of these people you see in public positions, they're just clones. The original Bill and Hillary are long gone. The original George Sr., he's long gone. You're looking at clones, folks. And every time they clone them, they get just a little bit stupider. Well, like I was saying, I kept watching, Bush Jr., he'd get up and say some of the stupidest things. Wow. I'm thinking, what's wrong with that guy?
Well, it was the most obvious one. It was very obvious.
Yeah, and so I asked one of my friends who's deep into that kind of stuff. I said, is that guy a drunk or a drug addict? And he told me the following thing. Now listen carefully. Here's his answer to my question: is Bush Jr. an alcoholic or a drug addict? His answer was, clones need cocaine to function. That was the only answer he would give me. Clones need cocaine to function.
Amazing. All this is going on, folks, behind our back. While they're keeping everybody ignorant, they're socially engineering us like sheep, and we're working and slaving away as they're closing in on us even more and more by destroying our constitutional rights and this crazy stuff going on in the liberal media, which is controlled by them. So that's why we were very, very close to, real disaster.
We've only got 2 ticks on the clock to go. We're just about there. So that's good. Anyway, it goes on a little bit more about this, what Janet Reno did. Originally went back and recaptured stockpiles of gold bullion. Says this bullion is to be used for the new currency backed by precious metals. It's now safely stockpiled at NORAD. No. Well, yeah, it's there if it hadn't been taken off to Venus. But the gold that was recovered in '93 through the operation, that was headed by Janet Reno, is not the gold, unless they brought it back online. I don't know. But there's a lot of strange things with the military and gold bullion. for instance, I have been told, I don't know if it's true or not, but they actually use gold bullion as ballast in some of the big uh, carriers. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. I don't know. But it's a good place to store it. I mean, put it in the, in the keel or whatever of a big ship, just shipping around all over the planet. I don't know.
And
There's a lot of crazy things that goes on with this stuff, folks, and I can't account for all of it.
all right. I just want to know if the clones know that they're clones.
Yeah, they do.
Do they think they're the original person?
Yeah. Like I say, if you want to go see a good, funny movie about that, that one with, uh, now I can't even remember the name of it. Switching, no. Anyway, I've talked about it in the past. Funny movie about that. Anyway, so Janet Reno's actions so enraged the powers that be that it resulted in her death. She was then replaced with a clone. It was this creature that was responsible for covering up the various Clinton scandals. Said to keep the Secretary of the U.S. Treasury, Robert Rubin, in line too. He was a clone. For the remainder of their terms in office, both Reno and Rubin received their salaries from the IMF as foreign agents and not from the U.S. Treasury. Anyway, despite all this stuff, the legal team kept working. In 1993, the farmers' claim proceeded. The process name was changed to bank claims. Between the 93 and 96, U.S. Supreme Court required U.S. citizens to file bank claims to collect damages paid by the U.S. Treasury Department. Now, again, what are we doing with reclaiming your status and assets? Changing your status from U.S. citizens to anything else.
To live human.
Yeah, and so then we go file or we go record affidavits of ownership so that you can own your own body. See, a lot of these attempts they're talking about here, they did all these things without this knowledge. And so here, as Solutions in Commerce, I've been trying to put this knowledge out for people. Now, had they approached all these situations that they're dealing with here, would they have been more successful not being U.S. citizens, but by being something else, private people?
Right.
And I personally believe if that approach had been taken that way, that they would not have run into all those roadblocks. Because as a U.S. citizen, you are considered under the Trading with the Enemy Act as a combatant.
Enemy combatant, exactly.
And so why would they give you recourse and redress? Because you're the enemy. And the United States Supreme Court it works for what?
For the corporation.
Exactly. What is the Supreme Court of the United States of America? It's the Supreme Court of the state of Pennsylvania, for crying out loud. Not the one sitting in Washington, D.C. You see all the problems that come up when people don't know these things. So Schwarzenegger and all these people that was working on these farm claims and all this kind of stuff, they were simply screwing around with a fictional situation, and they came into it as U.S. citizens. It's no wonder they've run into those problems.
I can't wait for all the clone information to make it to the public.
Yeah.
And so they'll really understand how it wasn't only just a matter of people being bribed, but replaced with clones like Janet Reno. Interesting.
Yeah, you can see a complete change in her.
Yeah.
I mean, I lived during those times. I wasn't paying exactly a whole lot, attention to it all. But there came a point when she completely changed directions. That's when they killed her and cloned her.
It's amazing.
It happens all the time. Like I say, I remember when what's that guy's Paulson name? He was the Secretary of Treasury.
Paulson.
Yeah, we knew he was killed. They shot him to death right there right before Christmas, I think, that year. And next thing you know, he's popping right back up again. The information I got was the Israelis killed him. Mossad shot him to death. And the first thing you know, he's popping right back up again. Matter of fact, I think he's still around, isn't he?
Yeah, that whole issue of Israel and our government, that's who's been bribing them, and that should be kind of coming to light soon
Yeah,
too.
this is a real good study, and I want to move it along a little bit so we can get into the real meat of it, which is in the SAR itself.
Right, because we're at like the 2 hour mark almost. So
Yeah, well, we started just a little bit late. Anyway, 1998, military generals who originally participated realized the Supreme Court had no intention of implementing the accords. So a 75-page document known as the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, or Nesara, was submitted to Congress, where it sat with little action for almost a year. Then in 2000, late one evening on March the 9th, 2000, a written quorum call was hand-delivered by Delta Force and Navy SEALs to 15 members of the U.S. Senate and U.S. House who were sponsors and co-sponsors of Nesara. They were immediately escorted by Delta Force and Navy SEALs to their respective voting chambers, where they passed the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, which President Clinton signed into law. Okay, March the 9th, 2000. That's when this happened. Now, how many members of Congress actually voted on that? 15 members. Why didn't the rest vote on it? They were unqualified.
they were being
First
bribed. They
off,
were
they were
bribed.
attorneys.
Right, they're not supposed to have
They couldn't
attorney.
sign on to that because, the attorneys are corrected directly to Temple Bar in the City of London. Now, we've taken measures to get that connection cut off. And Louisa, we did that. I won't go into it just now, but yeah, we have broken that connection of the attorneys in the House and in the Senate. We've broken that bond between them and the City of London. So that technically they're no longer attorneys. Now, was that going to change the way they act and think? Well, no, not exactly. But we've gone to great measures to break that bond. Anyway, these 15 members were only people lawfully allowed to hold office in accordance with the original 13th Amendment. And it goes into a little bit of that. All right. Now, Nesara is the most groundbreaking reformation to sweep not only this country, but our planet in its entire history. The act does away with the Federal Reserve Bank, the IRS, the shadow government, and much more. Nesara implements the following changes. All right, now I'm not going to go over all these. I'm going to supply this article to Louisa. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, but then it goes over all of the see, it goes right here. See, in item number 8, it talks about the interim government. So I'm not blowing smoke with this stuff.
Well, we've been reporting this since the beginning of the POTUS reports.
There you go.
We've had 71 POTUS reports, so 71 weeks we've been talking about Nesara. It's from the beginning, from the beginning of Donald Trump's term. Actually, right when I was talking about it even before I started to do the POTUS reports, right when he was being, when he was through the election.
October the 10th, 2000, because President Clinton's clone had no interest in signing Nesara into law. Under orders from U.S. military generals, the elite Navy SEALs and Delta Force stormed the White House and under gunpoint forced clone Clinton to sign Nesara. During this time, Secret Service, White House security stood down, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes into, we don't have time to go through this whole article, but then it goes into what happened on September the 11th, 9/11.
Right.
They were simply trying to prevent Nesara.
Yeah, that's when it was supposed to go into effect. So, right?
Yeah. All right. So this article here, we'll supply it for you so you can read it and study it. She has many places you can go to verify her research. Again, this compiler, this Nancy Detweiler, is a credible source for information, and she had before she had written this article, she had spent 7+ years researching this. This is not a fly-by-night operation, folks. This is somebody who had taken the time, rolled up her sleeves, went to work, and found the information. So again, you're not just listening to Winston. You'll go on and on about all this stuff. Here's somebody with credentials
Mm,
who has found these things, and she reports me to the places where she found them.
mm,
So again, like I say, we're just trying to supply to people
mm,
a little bit more information, so that again, you can, you're not surprised when it happens. Like I say, we're in the 11th hour,
mhm.
59 minutes, 58 seconds. We got 2 seconds before it's going to hit. And so we would like for people to be prepared. And certainly we can't reach everybody in the country with this information, but we reach as many as we can, so that when the issues come up,
Mhm.
that our listeners will be prepared to explain these things to family, friends, in their communities, and so forth. And
Right.
so that's why that's why we're doing this. Now,
Heard this. Yeah.
finally, when all these things do get in place and so forth, uh, to be perfectly honest, I'll be doing other things.
Mm,
I'll be doing other things because we have, huge, huge projects that we have been waiting on. And for instance, I talked about the med beds concept, but we have other huge projects that we have been accumulating, waiting upon funds. And so, once these things happen, uh, I don't know, maybe we'll do some more reports and stuff, but it would be simply reports to say, okay, we got this project over here, we need help. We got this
right.
project over here, we need help.
Well, that's why
We need
Goldfish Report.
staffing. We need people to jump in and give us a hand with some of these very, very large projects.
Which will be
Like I
paid
say,
and they'll be compensated very, very well for it, won't they?
absolutely.
Better than they could ever imagine.
Now, like I say, I'm an old guy. I just turned 70 years old. I need a nap in the afternoon.
Well,
But
that's why we're hoping Goldfish Report, we've spent 3 years building Goldfish Report to, eventually, hopefully reach a greater audience. We hope people will share this far and wide so that more people can tune into Goldfish Report when there are things to report. When Winston has these projects set up, we will report on them, Winston.
yeah,
Not every Friday morning, but we'll be reporting the progress. We'll be reporting what's really being done with the funds, so there's evidence of it, and people
yeah,
can find out that these things exist, these projects exist. There's many
yeah,
people that have humanitarian projects, and we're talking about from the healing, from irrigation. We're talking about re-nourishing our soil so we can grow food again from the poisons of the GMOs. We're talking about new, food
yeah. Now,
aquaponics projects, things of this.
let me express too that even though these sound like huge, huge projects, it'll be done by the boots on the ground. And that is, you'll go into your communities.
Mm,
You'll set up uh, opportunities. Let's say you set up a dental clinic. Where poor people can go and get their teeth fixed, or set up medical things. Where people can go and get the necessities that they need. Food banks. Housing, whatever. Don't think because we're talking about huge, huge projects, it has to be done, one person at a time.
right.
And so when we start to talk about, with all these projects and everything, it's not because we got some kind of great big thing going on over here, but every person, can do something in the community where you live at.
That's right.
And so if look around, and we'll deal with some of the bigger things, but tend to enlist millions of people in these projects. We intend to enlist millions of people because, again, most people are not going to go out and build a bridge or improve the highway. What are you going to do in your
Right.
community?
Exactly.
Well, how about we go over here to this retirement center? Well, we'll go over here to this rest home. How about we go over here to this, clinic?
Right.
I mean, you can do all those things, and that's where the real changes come, folks. It don't come from building skyscrapers or going to the damn moon.
No, and you can't, forget about people who just don't have accessibility
Yeah,
to participate in the projects. So the projects can focus on that. I mean, you had talked about the idea of these doing these pilgrimages and organizing that this individual who organized them was trying to organize one for handicapped people. I mean, how
yeah,
wonderful is that? It's just so
yeah.
everybody can be included. Um, in something that could be really spiritually transforming for people. So I hope that we're going to have that soon on the Goldfish Report. So we'll talk about
Yeah, I think we're really really close on all of these. So, like I say, here in the coming weeks, the direction that I would be talking in would not be exposing of the problems and all that kind of stuff, but saying, okay, now here's what we have. Here's the projects that we're working on. Would you like to participate in this? Or do you have projects in your community, your towns where you live at that you would like to go for? And so that information would be probably more conducive to a change on the planet than all these things that we've had to deal with for some which are simply disgusting.
right. Well,
We're
Winston,
sick and tired of the disgusting. Now we're going to go into something better.
I think we want to be clear though. This isn't like come and get money opportunity. This is
No.
that you have to
Yeah.
do something for you're going to earn the money doing
Oh
something.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just like you don't contact Goldfish Report and just say just look for money. This is about participation.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll
They
we'll
have to be
try
doing.
to get those things kind of rolling. It'll be slow starting, but as it like a snowball rolling downhill, it'll eventually get larger and larger and larger as we become adept at dealing with these things. Like I say, I'm not an organizer. I'm just honest to God, I'm just a hillbilly, and well, I am, and so
I'm
I don't have the skills to do organization or some of these things, but I know a lot of people do,
right.
and so I just hope to be a kind of an impetus, to get some of these things rolling, and then I'll go back to you know practicing ham bone and
Well, you never
all that
showed
kind of
us
stuff.
Hambone yet. And I have to tell
I
you,
told you what it would take.
yeah, well, I have to tell you, I think we do qualify after this last country road trip about. It was kind of a miracle in action. But, thank you, Winston, so much for bringing this to us and sharing this information today. It's really important. And I hope that our viewers will spread this far and wide. And thank you for all that you do, all that you've done on behalf of humanity, because you have played a very important role in making sure that this gets steered in the right direction, and it looks
Yeah.
like it has. So we just I just want to tell you personally, thank you for everything that you've done for
Well, we've just had a good time. Like I say, we're dealing with some pretty serious things here, but you still have to have a little bit of humor and, and just be, good old people. Like I say, I come from a community of people that looks out for each other, families, neighbors. If somebody needs something, you go and tend to it. And you don't ask anything for it. You just go and attend to it if somebody needs something.
mm,
Like I say, that was taught to me by my mother. She was a registered nurse, and she worked in the hospital and stuff like that. But everybody in the family or community knew if they had a problem.
mhm,
They knew what her phone number was, and they knew if they called, she would come. So again, I learned that as a young person,
mhm,
and so I've tried to keep that in my life. And so it has served me well. Let me put it that way. And so I've tried to impart those kind of values
mhm.
to others. And I think like I say, you know, I'm not a perfect man. I have a lot of foibles and problems and stuff like that. But there are at least some good things that I can do, and those good things I ought to do. And so I try. And so that's kind of the message I'm trying to press on, that that if we all take those kind of thought processes and use them and implement them,
Mhm.
we can change the world. One man or woman at a time, one family, one community, and then we can spread it. So again, don't think you have to go build skyscrapers or shoot rockets to the moon. I mean, for crying out loud, look around your community.
Yeah.
And then when you come and say, well, I got this project over here, we need $100 for some new brooms and shovels to sweep the streets. Well, at that point, we'll have it for you.
Right.
If it's only sweeping the streets or cleaning up your neighborhood or whatever you got, I mean, again, it's boots on the grounds, folks. Boots on the ground. It's me and you. That's how the changes will come. It won't come by the government. It won't come by these big fancy institutions and all this kind of stuff.
Right.
That's why it's so important to get the control of the money back into the hands of people. And that's what we're moving toward. And we've had a heck of a wrestling match to get it there.
Right. 10-4, Winston. We got that
10-4.
message. We got that message loud and clear. So thank you.
Right.
And I just want to say from this hybrid hillbilly, I'm a hybrid hillbilly. Hybrid hillbilly Jersey girl. Okay, so that we're going to have updates on the Goldfish report, and of course Goldfish report will go through transformation as well. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like yet, but you will follow us along and find out as we do as well. So we always wanted Goldfish report to be a place where you can ultimately, once this Nesara and these projects for humanitarian projects were ready, that these were things that you would be able to witness yourself. So in a sense, it would also be documenting the success of humanity, because I'll tell you, I mean, if I haven't seen other worlds, I haven't seen beyond this earth plane, but who would want to associate with us? We don't even take care of our own. We turn our cheek and walk the other way when somebody's suffering over here. I mean, come on. Who would want to have anything to do with humanity? So if we don't pick ourselves up and start getting together, we're never going to evolve any further than where we are. And I think that we're being given the chance to do that right now. So being responsible, like Winston said, with understanding that any kind of new prosperity program and funds really have to be heralded with you have to be a good steward of that and realize that there will be some karma attached to that. We've talked about that before on our POTUS reports as well, not just Country Roads, but POTUS reports too. So Winston, thank you so much. We'll see what happens. We will I hope everybody has a nice weekend and has a chance to really go over all this information. The articles will be posted as a link that will go right to our links page. So I'm going to just upload them onto the website. The link for the website page will be on this report. So you have to scroll down the page and you will see it's associated with the report number. This is Goldfish report number 230. And so under 230, you will see the links for the articles that Winston shared with us today. So having said that, I want to just remind our viewers to please visit us on Facebook on our news page, also on Twitter, and follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and subscribe to our BitChute channel, which is where all of our reports are published. If you want to view us on YouTube, our POTUS reports can only be accessed through the website, but all the other reports are available on the new YouTube. And please, folks, help us reach our we had over 12,000 subscribers, and when YouTube deleted our channel, we lost all the subscribers. I know you're still out there, so please come back and resubscribe to us, and let's do better than we did before. Let's have more than 12,000. And as you know, it's not about monetization. We never monetized our channel. It's just about knowing that that's how many people are participating with Goldfish Report. And if you're, and I want to just thank with the bottom of my heart before we close to all the people who do contribute, all the patrons who are on our Patreon site. Thank you so much. I love every one of you because you're all part of this. It's not just me, it's all of you making this happen too. So thank everybody for making the donations that you do, because that's what helps keep us going. Otherwise, I couldn't be here. Trust me. Wait until you all find out what's been happening in my life, and you'd be really surprised to know that I make it all these times to do these reports. It's going to come out one of these days, and your heads are going to be spinning. But
Yeah.
we got to just keep on trucking. So thank you so much. Thanks to all our viewers who contribute on our PayPal, which is on the front page of our website as well. And to all the wonderful people who contribute and who will send us links to articles, thank you so much. This is for you. So we're so glad that you're participating with us, because that's what we're doing here for you. And of course, like I said, Goldfish Report will probably go through some many transformations as well in this new time. So, okay, thank you for all of that. I hope everybody has a really great weekend. This is June 1st. Happy June to everybody. I think this will be a great month. Can't wait to see what's going to happen, Winston. So I hope you have a great weekend, Winston, and thank you very much again for this wonderful information.
Yeah, I'm just happier than the June bug.
June bug. Well,
Did
you
you
look,
did you did you ever get June bugs?
I think so. And there's little, children's stories named
No,
after
we
June
used to have
bugs.
June bugs. We'd catch them, we tie a thread onto one of their legs, and they would fly around. So
Hmm.
as we were flying these June bugs around.
Oh my gosh, this is,
Hey, when you ain't got that many toys, you got to find something to amuse yourself. So we used to get June bugs and tie threads to
well, you know what? At least you know what a June bug is. I mean, this is what the kids do today. This is it. They just take their phones, right? It's just nothing like that's it. They don't even
them.
know what goes on around them.
Yeah, they need to have the June bug experience.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, folks, have a great weekend. Thank you. Share this far and wide. Subscribe to our channel. It's just a sign of support, and make sure you get all the videos when they come out. So have a great weekend, and this concludes this edition of the Goldfish Report.